Pay attention to Leo Ross, 12 years old, walking home from school through Shire Country Park in Birmingham, England, on January 21st, 2025. He's on the phone with a friend, arranging to meet by a landmark tree. He has less than 10 minutes left to live because Kian Moulton, 14 years old, a boy from his own neighborhood, is hunting him on a bicycle with a knife. On this day, Leo thought he was taking his usual shortcut home. On this day, Kian had already attacked 2 elderly women and was looking for his next victim. This is the story of a boy who murdered his neighbor, then stood over his dying body pretending to be a helpful witness. Leo Ross was 12 years old, a student at Christ Church, Church of England Secondary Academy in Hall Green, Birmingham. He was described by everyone who knew him as a beautiful soul and a kind-hearted boy who always put others before himself. Leo lived in Hall Green, a leafy suburb in South Birmingham. His daily routine was simple and safe, or at least it should have been. Every day after school, he'd walk the 10-minute route home through Shire Country Park, a significant green corridor that stretched along the River Cole. On January 21st, 2025, Leo was doing exactly what he did every day. He left Christ Church around 3:20 in the afternoon. He was on his mobile phone, talking to a friend, making plans to meet near a specific tree in Tritterford Mill Park, a section of the larger Shire Country Park system. It was a routine walk, a familiar path, a safe shortcut that hundreds of school children use daily. Leo had no reason to be afraid. This was his neighborhood. These were paths he knew by heart. The park was active with students returning home, dog walkers, and local residents. But on this particular afternoon, someone was waiting for him. Someone who lived in the same neighborhood. Someone who moved in the same local youth circle. Someone Leo probably recognized. Kian Moulton was 14 years old, just 2 years older than Leo. He was a neighbor, an acquaintance within the Hall Green community. And over the past 48 hours, he had been conducting what the judge would later call a campaign of serious violence against vulnerable victims in that very same park. Leo Ross had no idea he was being hunted. He had no idea that the boy on the bicycle circling the park paths was about to change everything. He had no idea these would be his final moments. To understand what happened to Leo Ross, you need to understand the 2 days that came before, because Kian Moulton didn't suddenly snap. He was escalating, testing, hunting. 2 days before Leo's murder, Kian Moulton targeted an 82-year-old woman walking through Shire Country Park. This wasn't a random shove or a teenage prank. This was an attempted murder. Moulton pushed the elderly woman into the River Cole. As she struggled in the cold water, he grabbed her own walking pole, the device she used to maintain her balance, and began beating her with it. And while he beat her, he said something chilling. "I tried to drown you, but now I'm going to kill you." The woman survived, but barely. She suffered a broken nose, fractured ribs, and multiple facial lacerations. She had to fight for her life against a 14-year-old boy who explicitly stated his intent to kill her. This attack established Kian's pattern. Target someone smaller and weaker, attack them in the isolated riverside areas of the park where the dense greenery muffles sound, and inflict maximum suffering. The next day, Moulton attacked a 72-year-old woman. This time, he was on a bicycle, which gave him speed and mobility. He approached from behind and struck her head with such force that she suffered a profuse head wound and later required hip replacement surgery. Here's where things get interesting from a psychological standpoint. After this brutal attack, Moulton said something. "I'm sorry." It was brief, performative, and completely meaningless given what he'd just done. But it showed that Moulton understood social expectations. He knew what he was supposed to say. He knew what remorse was supposed to sound like. He just didn't feel it. That fake apology was a rehearsal. Because the next day, when he killed Leo Ross, Kian Moulton would take that performance to a whole new level. Look at the escalation. Day 1, attempted drowning and beating with explicit homicidal intent. Day 2, severe assault causing head trauma and hip fracture, followed by fake remorse. Day 3, a fatal stabbing. Each victim was vulnerable. The 82-year-old woman, the 72-year-old woman, and then Leo, a 12-year-old boy, smaller than Moulton, alone on a park path, distracted by a phone conversation. Kian Moulton was selecting targets he knew he could overpower. He was using the park's isolated riverside paths as his hunting ground. And on January 21st, 2025, he found his final victim. But what makes this case truly disturbing isn't just the murder. It's what Kian did afterward. At approximately 3:30 p.m. on January 21st, 2025, Kian Moulton was riding his bicycle through Shire Country Park. He'd been circling the area for a significant period. CCTV would later show this wasn't a casual ride. He was hunting. Leo Ross was walking along the riverside path near Scribers Lane, still on the phone with his friend. He was making plans, talking about meeting up, living his normal 12-year-old life. There was no argument, no confrontation, no provocation. Kian simply rode up to Leo and stabbed him in the abdomen with a knife he'd brought specifically for this purpose. The pathology report would later show this was a high-intensity strike, intended to cause maximum internal damage. Leo collapsed. His phone call with his friend ended abruptly. And then Kian Moulton did something that would shock even experienced homicide detectives. He didn't run. He didn't flee the scene in panic. Instead, he stayed. Kian's first action after stabbing Leo was methodical and calculated. He rode to nearby bushes along the River Cole and discarded the murder weapon. Then he cycled toward a group of other youths in the park, some of whom were Leo's friends. "Your mate has just been stabbed," he told them. "Think about that." The boy who had just plunged a knife into Leo's stomach was now alerting Leo's friends to come help. He was initiating the rescue effort for his own victim. The youths ran toward Leo. Kian rode ahead and approached an adult woman. He instructed her to call the police. He told her he'd just found a boy who'd been stabbed. He positioned himself as the helpful witness, the concerned passerby, the first person on the scene who discovered the victim. When West Midlands police arrived, paramedics were already working desperately to save Leo's life. And there, standing calmly near the emergency response, was Kian Moulton. Police body-worn cameras captured everything, and what they captured would become crucial evidence, not just of Kian's guilt, but of his disturbing psychology. On camera, Kian told officers, "He was lay there like that when I got here, and that's all I know about it." Notice that phrasing. That's all I know about it. He wasn't just answering questions. He was setting boundaries on what information he could provide, trying to shut down any deeper questioning before it could start.
Riding, because there's the mechanic shop up there.
Okay.
I was going to come through because that's leads out where that is. But I seen him, and then I seen this woman, she was walking down, so I told her to call you guys. Yeah, so I told her to call you guys. Then I went to get some help from different people, and that's all I know about it. He was laying there like that when I got here, and that's all I know about it.
Then he said something even more revealing.
Around 3-ish. Yeah. Was it 3 bang on, or was it after 3? Because it's now.
Can't really remember, but it was around the 3.
Near to 4. You've then seen the lady in
mark. No, I've seen him, and then as I was looking at it, I didn't touch him.
I haven't touched him. I didn't want to be implicated. On the surface, this might seem like a reasonable concern for a teenager who found a stabbing victim, but in context, it was a tactical move. Kian was preemptively explaining why police shouldn't expect to find his DNA or blood on Leo's body. He was already building his alibi, covering for evidence that might or might not exist. He provided directions to the officers, gave descriptions of the scene, positioned himself as an essential part of the rescue chain. Detective Inspector Joe Davenport would later describe watching this footage and being struck by something deeply wrong. Kian appeared to be standing there almost enjoying what he was seeing, not shocked, not traumatized, not horrified like a normal witness would be, enjoying it. But even the best performance has cracks. While speaking to other civilians at the scene, Kian's carefully constructed persona began to leak. Someone overheard him say, "If the police come, I've got to go." He told people to move in case I have to run. These statements completely contradicted his helpful witness act. Why would an innocent bystander who just discovered a victim need to run from police? Why would he be planning an escape route? This is what criminologists call behavioral leakage. When the internal stress of maintaining a lie causes the truth to slip out in small, contradictory statements. Kian Moulton stood at that scene for several minutes. He watched paramedics try to save Leo's life. He spoke calmly to police officers. He maintained his deception while Leo Ross lay dying just meters away. And then, when he felt he'd stayed long enough, he got on his bicycle and rode home at high speed. Leo Ross was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at hospital. He was 12 years old, and Kian Moulton, his 14-year-old neighbor, went home thinking he'd gotten away with murder. West Midlands Police Homicide Department didn't buy Kian's story. Not for a second. Detective Inspector Joe Davenport and his team had watched that body cam footage. Something was very wrong with the helpful witness. His demeanor was too calm. His explanations were too prepared. And those overheard comments about running from police were massive red flags. But suspicion isn't evidence. They needed proof. Detectives began the painstaking process of collecting footage from every camera in the area: residential doorbell cameras, council CCTV, shop security systems. Hundreds of hours of video. What they found destroyed Kian's entire story. The footage showed Kian circling Shire Country Park on his bicycle for a significant period before the murder. This wasn't a boy taking a casual ride. This was hunting behavior, stalking behavior. He was looking for a victim. CCTV placed him in the exact corridor of the park at the precise time Leo Ross's phone call to his friend abruptly ended. He wasn't a passerby who discovered the scene. He was there when it happened, because he made it happen. After playing the helpful witness for several minutes, cameras captured Kian riding home at high speed, behavior completely inconsistent with a traumatized witness who would typically stay to give a formal statement. That evening, January 21st, police arrested Kian Moulton at his home address. When officers entered his bedroom, they found the clothing he'd been wearing that afternoon. Forensic analysis revealed microscopic traces of Leo Ross's blood on the fabric. Remember how Kian had told officers he never touched Leo? How he'd been so careful to explain why there wouldn't be any DNA transfer? The blood proved he was lying, but the most damning evidence came from the River Cole. Despite Kian telling arresting officers they wouldn't find the knife, specialized search teams recovered a blade from the area where he'd been seen on CCTV. DNA testing of the knife handle and blade revealed a mixed profile: Kian Moulton's DNA and Leo Ross's DNA together on the same weapon. This wasn't circumstantial. This wasn't suggestive. This was absolute proof. Kian Moulton had killed Leo Ross with that knife, hidden it in the bushes, and then returned to the scene to play the role of concerned witness. And now he was going to face justice for what he'd done. Kian Moulton's trial took place at Birmingham Crown Court. Initially, he maintained a no-comment stance during police interviews, likely advised by his lawyers to preserve his options for trial. But as the Crown Prosecution Service compiled the evidence, the CCTV, the DNA, the body cam footage, the lies, the defense's position became increasingly untenable. On January 29, 2026, Kian Moulton appeared at Birmingham Crown Court, nearly a year after Leo's murder. He was now 15 years old. He entered guilty pleas to multiple charges: murder of Leo Ross, GBH, with intent, 2 counts, for the attacks on the 82-year-old and 72-year-old women, ABH, for another assault on January 21st, possession of a bladed article. The guilty pleas spared the families a 4-week trial, but they also meant Kian would have to face the full weight of his crimes at sentencing. Kian's defense team tried to argue that he suffered from childhood conduct disorder and ADHD. They suggested he experienced auditory hallucinations. They painted a picture of a troubled child whose mental health issues led to these violent acts. But the prosecution pointed to one undeniable fact: the body cam deception. A boy who could stand calmly at a crime scene, construct a detailed false narrative, maintain that lie under pressure while speaking to police officers, and manage the stress of playing a role, that's not a child in a psychotic break. That's calculated, rational behavior. On February 10th, 2026, Mr. Justice Chudhuri KC delivered the sentence. He addressed the sophistication of Kian's behavior. He noted that Kian had acted coolly and rationally when he chose to lie to officers at the scene. He dismissed the defense's attempt to use mental illness as an excuse that absolved Kian of moral responsibility. The judge described Kian's 3-day spree as a campaign of serious violence and noted the callousness of his post-offense deception. The sentence: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 13 years detention. This means Kian Moulton will not be eligible for a parole hearing until 2039, when he's 28 years old. And even then, release is not guaranteed. If the parole board determines he remains a danger, he'll stay in prison for the rest of his life. The judge also made the significant decision to lift the Section 45 reporting restrictions, which typically protect the identities of juvenile offenders. He wanted the public to know exactly who Kian Moulton was and what he'd done. For Leo's mother, Rachel Fisher, the 13-year minimum term wasn't enough. She called it a joke and expressed profound disappointment that the justice system didn't take juvenile violence seriously enough. "My son is gone forever," she said, "and his killer gets a chance at freedom while he's still young enough to have a life." It's a sentiment shared by many who followed the case. Leo was 12. He'll never turn 13, never graduate, never fall in love, never have children. His life was stolen. And Kian Moulton, who stole it, will eventually have the chance to walk free. The murder of Leo Ross shattered the Hall Green community and sparked a national conversation about youth knife crime in the United Kingdom. From a criminological perspective, this case is extraordinary. Kian Moulton didn't just commit murder, he integrated himself into the rescue effort for his own victim. This behavior is what criminologists call the Passerby ruse. By positioning himself as a helpful witness, Kian attempted to manipulate the investigation from the very beginning. He wanted to control the narrative, deflect suspicion, and, perhaps most disturbingly, derive psychological gratification from watching the chaos he'd created. Detective Inspector Davenport's observation that Kian appeared to be enjoying the scene is consistent with what experts call murderer's glee, a dopamine rush some killers experience after committing their crime. Combined with the pleasure of successfully deceiving authority figures, it can create an incongruous sense of calm or even satisfaction. The body cam footage from Leo's case will be studied by homicide detectives and criminologists for years to come. It's a rare, high-quality record of a killer caught in the act of deception, providing invaluable training material for recognizing the signs of a false witness. Leo's case became a flashpoint in the ongoing debate about knife crime among British youth. How does a 14-year-old boy acquire a knife, spend 3 days attacking vulnerable people, and successfully kill a 12-year-old neighbor before being caught? Community groups in Hall Green responded by distributing bleed kits throughout the park system, emergency supplies that could give future stabbing victims a higher chance of survival. It's a tragic necessity in a community that never thought they'd need such measures. Local artists created a mural on Scribers Lane to commemorate Leo's life. The landmark tree where he was planning to meet his friend has become an unofficial memorial site where people leave flowers and messages. Leo's family and friends describe him as a boy who put others before himself, who was kind-hearted and full of life. Those qualities make his murder even more senseless. He wasn't targeted because of anything he did. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, crossing paths with a predator from his own neighborhood. Leo's life mattered, his mother said, and I won't let people forget what was taken from us. The void left by Leo's death can't be filled by a prison sentence, no matter how long. Justice was served, but Leo is still gone, and Kian Moulton, the boy who killed him and then stood over his body pretending to help, will eventually have the chance at a life Leo will never know. If you've made it this far, thank you for learning about Leo Ross and the boy who murdered him, then had the audacity to pretend he was a hero. This case matters because it shows us that evil can come from unexpected places, from neighbors, from people within our own communities, from children who should be learning and growing, not hunting and killing. It matters because it demonstrates how sophisticated deception can be, even from a 14-year-old. Kian Moulton knew exactly what he was doing when he stayed at that scene. He calculated his lies, he managed his stress, he performed the role of helpful witness while Leo lay dying. But most importantly, this case matters because Leo mattered. He was 12 years old. He was walking home from school. He was on the phone with a friend, making plans like kids do. He deserved to live those plans and grow into the man he would have become. Remember Leo's name. Remember that behind every knife crime statistic is a real child whose life was stolen. Share this story. Look out for each other. And if you see something wrong, say something. Because Leo's case shows us that even familiar faces can hide dangerous intentions.